Welcome to the Tompkins County Public Library Makerspace. Today we're going to be talking about how to get started using the Epilog Laser Helix laser cutter. This machine can both cut and engrave a variety of materials, from wood to fabric to metal to glass. The Epilog laser machine can do two separate things. It can raster, which means engrave. For example, on this logo, all the image that's not cut all the way through is what has been rastered or engraved. It can also vector, which means cut. The outside edge, the circle part, is what was cut out of this piece of wood to make it into a magnet. Those are two separate lines that you'll design in the program that you're using, for example, Inkscape. The primary software we're going to use for preparing prints for the Epilog Helix is Inkscape. Inkscape is an open source software that you can use at home to prepare your prints. It's a vector program very similar to Adobe Illustrator. So here we are inside a new document on Inkscape. The first thing I like to do is change the size of the document so that it's the same as the build plate on the Helix. So you can hit Control-Shift-D, and that pops up the document properties. There's a lot of adjustments on here, but the only thing you really have to worry about is changing the units to inches and making the width 24 and the height 18. Then you can just X out of that. And I'm zooming so that we can see our build plate nicely. So here's our build plate. This is where you can draw out what you want to be printed by using vector lines. Your tools are along the left-hand side. The one that I find the most useful is this Draw Bezier Curves and Straight Lines. The shortcut is Shift F6. And to do this, you can draw with dots. It's basically like playing Connect the Dots to make shapes. Okay, so I did it. You can't see anything on there because I need to add a stroke to the outside of my shape. So on the side, on the right-hand side, there's the fill and stroke options. I'm going to hit Stroke Paint, and then I'm going to choose the first box, which is solid. And then I'm going to go to Stroke Style, and I'm going to make this something we can see right now, so I'm going to make it 0.6. Okay, so now there's an object on the build plate. I can move it around, I can adjust it. This is something that you can play with at home and get good at. But what I want to show you is, in order to make the line something that the machine will know to cut rather than to just draw on top of your material, you need to set your stroke style width. So you want to set it to inches, and the width of the line needs to be 0.001 inch. This is the code that tells the laser that that is something that we are going to want to cut. So any line you have in your piece that's that width is a line that's going to be cut out of your material. You can also add other shapes. You can fill them in with the fill option, just like you're using Paint or Illustrator. Or you can drag in a JPEG or a picture you like and put it in the center, whatever you want to do. But anything else you put in there, like a JPEG picture or a PNG image, is going to be something that the machine is going to engrave, not cut out. If you have an image like that and you want part of it to be cut out, you're going to have to outline it using those Bezier curves and points, and then set it to the 0.001 inch line width so that the machine knows to cut that part out. There's a lot more that you can learn how to do with Inkscape, and we recommend checking out YouTube for lots of interesting videos for how to get good at using the different tools quickly. So now if you're happy with your image, this is a kind of lopsided circle. I'm going to show you how to export it so that it's ready to go for the cutting and engraving with the Epilog. You're going to go up to File in the upper left-hand corner, and you're going to Save As. Name it something that you recognize, like maybe your first name. I'm going to call this Katie Circle. And you can save a copy as an Inkscape SVG so that you'll be able to edit it, but for the one that you're going to actually send to the printer, you want to just save it as a PDF. That's a familiar file type and it's really easy to use. Okay, so I'm going to save it on the desktop. Just going to say OK. Great. So now I can go to my desktop, find that object I just created as a PDF, right-click on it, and ask it to open with Adobe Acrobat Reader DC. This might be the first option, but you might have to ask it to do that with the Open With option. So now I have it opened. It looks fine. It's in the part of the build plate that I want it to be. Make sure it fits onto my 12-inch wood. Okay, so now I've got the file that I've designed before I arrived. It's got a little bit of a border edge to it to make sure that I'm not too close to the edge of my material. And it's the same size as the material I'm going to be cutting on. You'll notice that the actual paper document size that I've set is much larger than the size of the material I'm using. I did this so that we could envision how much of the build plate our material is going to take up. So this is 12 by 12, which is how big my piece of wood is, but this is the size of the bed, which is 24 by 18 inches. So now that I have my file ready to go, it's saved as a PDF, which is what the machine will use to read. I'm going to go to File, Print, as if I was just sending it to a computer printer. Okay, so I need to change the printer to be the Epilog Helix printer. Epilog Helix engraver. It's still only giving me this little piece of space, so I need to go into Properties and make some adjustments. When you open Properties, you'll see the Epilog Helix Properties module. This is where you can make all your adjustments, and you need to be careful moving throughout the adjustments to make sure everything is correct to get the best print. The first option here is resolution. We have it set at 600, which is correct for wood. Because this pattern has both rastering, engraving, and vectoring, cutting, we're going to use a combined setting rather than one or the other. But if your piece is just cutting it out, you can just select vector or raster if you're just engraving something that you don't want cut at all. I'm going to leave it at combined. Under options, I'm going to choose autofocus and leave it at that. I'm also going to select send to laser and send to manager. Now I can set my speed and power settings. We have a cheat sheet next to the machine that tells you what normal materials in the machine will use. Our raster setting for this is a speed of 100 and a power of 40, according to the manual. Our vector setting is the same, 140 for power. The frequency here is 2500, and we're just going to leave that alone, but you can adjust that depending on the material you're using. Something like a fabric would use a much lower frequency. You still need to change the piece size, so I'm going to make my horizontal 24 inches and my vertical 18 to make it fit the bed of the printer. Then I'm going to click OK, and I can see from my preview here that it looks a lot better. It's showing the whole print bed, and it's showing my piece in the upper corner where I want it. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure that I have all three things turned on: the laser, the outside exhaust fan, and the inside air compressor, and then I'm going to be ready to hit print. Make sure that the USB is attached to both the Helix and to the laptop via this red USB cord. If you have sent your print over and it doesn't seem to be appearing on the laser, you might need to unplug and replug in the USB port and send your job again. Once you've got your design created, you need to figure out what kind of cutting bed you need to use to make sure that your design comes out nicely. If you're vectoring or cutting out objects, you need to have a waffle base. This base has holes in it, which is what you need to use when you're cutting objects. If you're just engraving something, you want it to be on the most solid, flat surface possible, and you'll use a different kind of bed. Next, I'm going to show you how to change the beds for if you're rastering, engraving, or if you're cutting, vectoring. Now, first you want to click the focus button, which is number 6 on this keypad. Now it's in focus mode. You'll hit the down arrow so that you have a little bit of space to work, and this will move the bed and the machine down. Okay, now I have plenty of room to work. To change the bed, you're going to lift the rulers on the 3 sides where you can see them, and that loosens the bed enough that you can lift it out of the machine. The bed that's not in use is stored on top of this filing cabinet. Now I'm going to install this, which is a flat bed that's used for engraving rather than cutting. So I'm going to set it into the machine, being careful not to hit the laser attachment, and then drop it in so that it doesn't move. Now I'm going to flip down the rulers on the 3 sides where you previously lifted them. And that bed is in place and all set and ready to go. You would do the same thing if you're switching out the flat bed for the bed with the waffle cut. Now that you've installed the bed that you need for your project, you can hit the reset button to take it out of focus mode and get ready to make your job. So now you're ready to put the material that you're going to be cutting into the machine. We're going to try this piece of birch. This is the wood that we've been using here, but you should be able to use other kinds of wood as well, and other materials, which will be on a guide next to the machine. So we're going to align it with the rulers at the top of the machine and just drop it right into place. This is a very thin piece of material, so I'm not too worried about where the build plate is starting, but if you had a bigger object, like a box or something that took up more space in here, you would want to use that focus button like we showed you before to move the bed up or down to make room for what you are putting into the machine. So if my object was this big, you'd want to make sure you had enough space here by raising and lowering the bed. This little metal piece is a little plunger which will help you figure out how close your material should be to have it be engraved properly. This should just be touching the very tip of your material when you're ready to print. We're going to turn on autofocus, so this will happen automatically. Okay, once your material is loaded into the machine, you're ready to close the lid. Be careful because the lid will just fall and we don't want to break it. So you want to take the handle and guide it all the way down. First, you want to turn on the exhaust fan, which is located on the wall over the device. Flip that to the on position, and you'll hear it as it starts up and makes a fan-like noise. Next, you can turn on the laser itself with a switch on the side towards the back where the plug goes. When you turn that on, the lights will come on and you'll know that it's on. And last, but most important, you need to turn on the air compressor, which is located on the floor to the left of the machine. There's also a switch right on the machine. So after hitting print, the job came right over to the printer, and my job was called multiple TCPL logos. You can just see the word multiple, but that's okay. So now I know that it's all ready to go, and when I'm ready to print, I can just hit this green go button, and that will trigger the machine to first autofocus and then begin engraving. After it finishes engraving, it will go back and it will cut. If you aren't certain that it's going to start up right where you want it to be and you're feeling precious about your material, you can open the lid of the machine, which will make it so that you cannot have the laser going. And you can push number 9, which is pointer. This turns on a green light, and in the print bed, you can zoom in right here, it makes a red dot right in the corner, and that's its center point. So I'm going to hit go, and it'll show us where it's going to start printing just using that red dot. And remember, because it's open, there's not going to be any laser happening. Okay, that looked fine to me, so I went ahead and pushed the stop button. It's engraving right over the wood, right where I want it to be. It's not somewhere over in the middle of the bed. This is a nice double check to do before you actually do your final one. Okay, so because I did that, it's paused. I'm going to hit the reset button, which is number 0 on the keypad. And it's going back to its home position to start again. I can close the top now. And I'm confident that it's going to print exactly how I want it to. It still remembers that the job is on the printer, so now that I'm ready to go, I'll make sure that my 3 things are turned on, and I'll hit the green go button to do my actual laser cut. Now the engraving print has begun. Don't be concerned if you see smoke coming off of the print. We're cutting wood, so a little smoke is to be expected. But if it looks really scorched, or it looks darker or deeper than you want it to, you might want to stop and readjust your print and restart it. Because of this, it's a good idea to do a test print on a piece of material that's not your final object so that you don't waste your material. Okay, now that your print has finished, we didn't let ours finish just for this example, but if yours has finished, you're going to lift the lid and you can remove your object. Make sure you get any kind of little pieces that might have popped out that were cut, and your finished object will be lovely. You can hit reset, and then you can hit go again if you want to do the same print a second time. Otherwise, it's all set and you'll be good to go. Make sure you turn off the Epilog laser, the exhaust fan, and the air compressor on the floor before you leave the space. Just a quick troubleshooting note. If you hit print and then you hit go on the machine and it immediately finishes and says that it's done with the print, you may need to adjust the line width that you set in stroke. You might have accidentally not had it save with the correct line width, and you might need to make that adjustment. Another troubleshooting tip: if your engraving is coming out much too dark, or it's making too much flame or little bursts of smoky looking area on the outside of your print, you may need to turn down the speed or the power. Making small adjustments can really change the quality of your final product. For example, if I'm engraving a photo into wood and I'm using 40 speed and 100 power, I may choose to turn it down to 30 speed and 100 power, just to make it so that it doesn't have so much of a burn, scorched look in the end. A quick safety note: never leave the makerspace with the Epilog Helix laser running. Someone needs to be in the space monitoring this machine at all times that it's running. Because it uses fire, it is definitely a safety hazard to not be keeping an eye on it. As your prints are printing, you may see little wisps of flame, and that's usually okay. It's the more serious fires that we're worried about. If it catches on fire, leave the top closed, push the stop button, and it should go out on its own. If it doesn't go out on its own, call over the Makerspace librarian. A fire extinguisher is located outside of the room to the left. We look forward to working with you in the Tompkins County Public Library Makerspace using the Epilog Laser Helix. We hope you enjoyed learning about it today. Have a great day, and thanks for being a maker with us.